We'd like to get started. If you could please take your seats. All right. Good evening and welcome to what is our fourth town hall meeting. As I have been saying the last 7.5 months, I am Jim Ruane, the very proud mayor of this wonderful city of San Bruno. Thank you for coming tonight. These town hall meetings have been our effort to bring you up to date, to answer your questions, to inform you as we go forward in our efforts to rebuild our lives and our entire community. I am joined this evening by the entire City Council, Vice Mayor Salazar, Council members Irene O'Connell, Rico Medina, and Ken Ibarra, along with a number of other elected officials, Carol Bonner, our city clerk, and city staff led by Connie Jackson, the very capable Connie Jackson. Also co-hosting the town hall is the person who has been by our sides since day one, and that's your Congresswoman Jackie Spear. Just a little bit later, we will have some presenters this evening, people to answer questions and to tell you what's been going on, representatives from PG&E, Kirk Johnson, and also the California Public Utilities Commission, the Executive Director, Paul Clannon. Our Community Director, Development Director will give us an update on the reconstruction, and I would also like to announce that we'll be hosting another Glenview get-together on May 22nd in City Park. You'll be hearing from Randy Schwartz about that. He will also update you on the Resource and Recovery Center in downtown San Bruno and let you know that we are working on preparations for our first anniversary memorial. I give you Jackie Spear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the members of the City Council. Thank you to Connie Jackson, your able city manager, and to the entire staff for an incredible job. This is our 5th town hall that we have had on behalf of the residents in San Bruno. We said at the beginning that we would be with you until the end, and we will. And unfortunately, the end is not yet in sight, but we are making progress. When I think back at some of our earlier meetings, I'm reminded of the power of community. I remember seeing white t-shirts in St. Robert's Church with the message, PG&E, get rid of the pipe. You had some great line, I forget what it was. And at that meeting, PG&E agreed not to reinstate line 132 in the neighborhood. We then had issues raised about the IRS and whether or not those payments that you received would be taxable. I made a couple of threats to the IRS commissioner. My staff did some extraordinary work in making the case. We got a commitment from the IRS to recognize that since flame retardant had been sprayed on all of your homes and that you had damage, you therefore would not be taxed on the payments that were made to you. Now, for those of you that are like me and have yet to file your income tax but have in fact filed for an extension, you will know that you have that issue dealt with now. So we move forward with more issues and we'll address them as they come forward. But we've got some great news to report. The last burn victim from the blast has left the burn center at St. Francis in San Francisco and is now in rehabilitation. And I spoke to the spouse who said that things are going very well, and within 2 weeks, maybe, our last burn victim will be home. So, and I was thrilled when they walked up the walkway just a few moments ago to see Alan and Cindy Braun, who were severely burned in that fire and explosion, who spent many, many months at the burn center at St. Francis. I visited them a number of times. They are here in the audience. Stand up so we can say bravo. you should know it's thrilling for all of us to see you here. We also have a creature that has been to every one of these town halls, Gus. Where is Gus? Gus is sitting in the back. What is his breed? Bulldog. I should know that. But anyway, we want to thank Gus for being here as well. You know, what this has really taught all of us is that the power of community, the fabric of this particular community of San Bruno, is so strong that nothing can tear it apart. And the city fathers and mothers have made that very clear to you from the beginning. An extraordinary effort has been underway since September 9th to help everyone rebuild their lives. And rebuild your lives, we will make sure happens. There are a couple things I just want to reflect on as we hold this town hall tonight. Of immediate importance is the fact that PG&E will now hydro test 200 miles in its system. Now that is very important because at the National Transportation Safety Board meeting that was held, the hearing that was held in Washington, D.C. in March that many of the members of the council attended and participated in along with staff, hydro testing was the gold standard to make sure that it is safe for those pipes to be in operation. PG&E is here tonight to explain the steps that will be taken over the next few months. They intend to have that particular function completed by October of this year before the winter season comes on us. CPUC is here tonight. They will be closely monitoring the testing, which is important as well. Having the overseer, having the CPUC, having the regulator there is key to proper safety moving forward. I'm also seeking clarification tonight, perhaps Mr. Clannon can provide me with it. I want to know who ultimately is going to pay for these tests. PG&E tells me that the cost of setting up the test is about $500,000 for each test and up to $150,000 per mile. This is an expensive proposition. But this is being done because there were not proper documentation, and I want it to be made clear here tonight that I believe very strongly that the payment for this test, for these tests for the 200 miles and presumably the 500 miles, is going to be paid for by the shareholders, not the ratepayers. And let me be clear, you know, the cost of safety is built in to the rates that we pay. And when PG&E went before the CPUC some years ago and developed a plan for replacement of pipes, it was folded into the rate. Now they stopped short of completing that replacement process, and ironically stopped short 900 feet from where the explosion took place. And yet that was folded into the rate. Now, when it's folded into the rate and that is not completed, and in this case, indirect assessment was then thought to be a better way to go, my question really is, what happened to that money? And I have a question in a letter form that's before the CPUC right now. They've had it for close to a month, and I am not going to sit down. Well, I will sit down tonight, but I am not going to sit down until we have the answer to what happened to that money. If it was shifted from providing safety to ratepayers and shifted to profits for shareholders, then we have a big problem, and it's got to be fixed. So whether it's golden parachutes or utility-backed campaigns, initiatives, or shortcuts on safety, this back and forth about fines for failure to produce documents is not one that I want to engage in. Because any fine that is imposed is either going to go to the CPUC or the general fund of the state. I want the money spent on making it safe for every person who lives along a transmission line on PG&E's system. That's what we should be focused on, and whether it's hydro testing or its replacement, that's where our focus should be. So, with that, I thank you all for joining us tonight, and we'll have some updates, I believe, on behalf of the City of San Bruno, and then we'll answer your questions.
Thank you, Jackie. I would like to ask Aaron Acton to join me here and give us some updates on the neighborhood access and the private property rebuilding and some of the planning and building processes taking place. Aaron?
Thank you. I know many of you already, but my name is Aaron Acton. I'm the Community Development Director with the City of San Bruno, so all the planning and building type development falls within my department. As many of you know, there's basically 38 homes that were destroyed because of this tragedy, and about another 17 that were severely hurt where people are no longer living within them. And they have to go through a rebuilding process, which includes new design. And your home basically falls into one of two categories for the complete rebuilds. The larger homes have to go through a two-step process, which includes public review as well as the structural review. And the second one is the smaller homes that just have to go through a structural review process. So far of the 38 homes, we've received 4 applications for rebuilding. 2 fell within the category where they did require public review, so many of you probably received notices about those. And they were approved from a planning standpoint, and now they're on to the structural review phase. We also have the other two that are also in the structural review phase. So construction will begin soon. One of the building permits is almost set to go, and the other one should be set to go soon. We also received an application for one of the yellow tag homes to add a second story, and that one's about to be approved as well. So I'm sure that you'll start to see construction in your neighborhood soon. I'm going to go through some frequently asked questions that we've got from many of people within the neighborhoods. The first one is, are the homes, I'll touch on, in addition to these 4 and 5 homeowners that I just mentioned, we're also working with about another 17 homeowners that are in some stage of design. So about 21 or 22 of the 38 homes that were destroyed already in some stage of design to rebuild their homes. So obviously that is great news for the neighborhood. One of the questions we're getting is, are the homes that you're currently working with the homeowners, are they being proposed larger than they were before? And many of the homeowners are asking, if I do propose a larger home, am I going to be asked to reduce the overall size of it? Overall, it's kind of gone either way. We have had some that are proposed to be about the same size as they were before. Generally, though, they are a little bit larger. Homes that were built in the 50s, the rooms were generally smaller. People have larger rooms now. The garages were smaller. They're slightly larger garages now. So we are seeing an increase in size in some of the homes, while some of them are the same size as they were before. The second question, will I be asked, if I'm proposing a larger home, will I be asked to reduce the size? In some cases you may, if it's not compatible with the neighborhood. Mostly from a design standpoint, though. I think on the homes that we've reviewed so far, we may have asked for 50 square foot, maybe 100 square foot reductions. It's not really a numbers game in terms of how big a floor area you could have, but it's more of a design issue. We want to make sure that these homes that are proposed are well designed and they're compatible with the neighborhood, and you'll have a great well-designed neighborhood moving forward. Second question we get is, and we got this from a number of people, is do we have to hire an architect? And the short answer is no, you don't have to hire an architect, but a word of caution with that is you do have to hire someone who is familiar with the building code. One thing that we do not have the luxury of, although we've expedited the process, we've waived the building permit fees and done a number of things, you still have to meet what the California building code is. And that's especially important given this neighborhood is just a quarter mile from the San Andreas Fault. So you do need to hire someone who knows what the California building code is, what the mechanical issues are, what the electrical issues are, and make sure that you incorporate those inside the plans when you submit them. The third question is, are the codes still in effect? Just what I said before, yes, we're making sure that even though we're expediting the process, we still want to make sure we don't have any authority to waive California building codes. And then from a local standpoint, we want to make sure, we've heard from a lot of people that we want to make sure that these homes are well designed. Another question we get, is there any green building code standards in effect? What we have in effect is what the state of California has in effect. They recently approved the new green building code. There's several different tiers to this. There's basically 3 tiers. We fall within the middle tier, which is the tier 1 of green building code standards. Your design professional will understand this, but we're happy to sit down with you and talk to you about this. And one thing I failed to mention here is I have a number of my staff members here. Mark Sullivan from my office is here tonight. Laura Russell is here tonight, who's a planner, as well as Gary Lepori, who's our building official. So they're available to answer any questions that you may have. And what I encourage everyone to do is, right when you decide to rebuild, and many of you have already done this, is right when you decide to rebuild, contact a planner. Talk to us early on, because the earlier you talk to us, the quicker the whole process is going to you. Many of the designers and architects we've developed great relationships with. They email us early designs back and forth. We're able to provide comments and just expedite the process. So when you're ready to rebuild, you could be rebuilt quite quickly, and we're not another hurdle within the process. Another question we get, who will review my plans when I submit them to the city? A number of departments will review them. However, we're working really hard to make our process efficient, and your point of contact will be the planner within the community development department. So you will be assigned a planner, either Lisa, Laura, Matt, or sometimes myself, and we'll be working with you. But the fire department will be involved for sprinkler issues. The engineering department will be involved for things like where your driveway access will be, if it's different than it was before, what the slope is, so you have proper drainage within your area. And of course, the building division within the community development department will be involved for all the structural type issues. Another question we're getting is, when will the surveys be complete? As you know, many of the homeowners received a notice asking for permission to get on your property to do surveys. We received those back from most homeowners. We finally got we had to have a clear day at noon in order to do a flyover with the plane for topographical reasons. We have that now. The surveys should be complete the week of May 1st. That week, the property owners who did sign the permission slip will be getting a call from the engineer, so you will have your surveys complete. And at that point, you could let us know, or your engineer or your architect could let us know what format you want that survey in, whether it's a CAD format, a PDF format, and we could email that to you, or actually get you or get you a hard copy. On the engineering side, we've got questions about when will we finally get access through Glenview Drive. Now, right now, the NTSB will not allow us to fill that hole. And until we fill that hole, we cannot provide safe access through that neighborhood. So once we get word from NTSB that their investigation is done, we'll be able to quickly provide some temporary access to that. And once we have all the details together, we'll be able to have permanent access through the neighborhood. So we're working with NTSB closely to make sure this happens quickly, and we'll keep the neighborhood updated so that you will have access through Glenview Drive and be able to get to Lunardi's or get to San Bruno Avenue quickly. They're also the same question in terms of infrastructure. What's the water situation? What's the sewer situation out there? Temporary measures have been put in place, so there is water, there is sewer. One thing that we're working on now, and it's a bit of a tricky issue because we are working with close to 50 homeowners on rebuilding and a lot of construction going on, is lining up how the public infrastructure is going to be complete, the permanent ones, compared to the final infrastructure. For instance, when you have 50 contracting crews going through the neighborhood, you probably don't want to put in your final road and sidewalks in that can be damaged during the construction process. So we're working on a visioning strategy, we're working on a detailed strategy in order so when the permanent improvements do go in, they're there and they look great, and they look as great as the neighborhood will be from a design standpoint. So as always, my department's there if you have any questions from the development standpoint. The Public Services Department is always here if you have any questions from an engineering or a public infrastructure standpoint. So we'll continue to update the neighborhood as things progress. Anytime if you go to our website at sanbruno.ca.gov, click on Glenview, there's the rebuilding section there, and all the public review homes are posted there so you can see the design that were approved, so you can see the new homes that were within your neighborhood. And please give us a call or email us if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Aaron joins us tonight after just a few days of paternity leave because he has a new son named Jack, so congratulations.
What's his name?
Jack. I'd like to call on Randy Schwartz, going to give us a brief update on some upcoming events and the Recovery Center. Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 1 month ago, on March 29th, the San Bruno Resource and Recovery Center opened its doors at 458 San Mateo Avenue. I know many of you were there for the grand opening ceremony. The center is supported by donations from the Peninsula Healthcare District to both the City of San Bruno and to the American Red Cross. And the American Red Cross staff did a wonderful job of remodeling the inside, making sure that it is available for services for the residents of the neighborhood. Some of the services that are available at the center are mental health counseling and referral, case management, housing and health services, resident resources. There's computers that you can go down and use. There's office equipment that is available for you there. There are also many trainings or meetings that are held by members of the Long-Term Recovery Committee, and those are there. The center is open on a drop-in basis from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays, and at other times when there are scheduled classes or activities, you can also call down and set up an appointment with any of the case managers to help you with any of the needs you may have. There are flyers on the back table as you leave here today with all of the information, including the phone number for the Resource and Recovery Center, so please grab one of those on the way out. Also, as the Mayor was saying, that there are 2 events that are being planned by the Long-Term Recovery Committee and our local service organizations, the San Bruno Lions Club, San Bruno Rotary Club, and those plans are going on. You will hear more details about them within the next week or so. The first one of those will be held on May 22nd. It will be Sunday. We are looking at a Sunday afternoon in the park. We held an event up here at the Senior Center on January 8th, and I know many of you were here for that. It will be similar, where there will be food and children's activities, but the main part of it is a chance for residents of the neighborhood to socialize, to get together, and if there's any support that's needed, those services will be there as well. We are also in the beginning stages of planning an event for Friday, September 9th, 1 year from the date of the tragedy, and all of those details will also be getting to all of the residents soon. If you have any ideas or thoughts on what you would like to see on either one of those events, you can see me after the meeting. You can leave one of the slips of paper for us, and we will take those ideas. The Long-Term Recovery Committee members and the Service Club representatives were meeting tomorrow to begin the planning. And again, we will get that information to you soon. So if you just put those dates on the calendar for now, May 22nd and September 9th. Thank you.
A couple of introductions that were made. Mark Hirschman from Assemblymember Jerry Hill's office is with us. And at very short notice, the district attorney from this county, who I'm just so impressed with, Steve Wagstaff, agreed to come to answer any questions based on the new revelation that came out earlier today about the U.S. Attorney investigation. I also had a couple of announcements I forgot to make early on. The Secretary of Transportation, Ray LaHood, will be here on May 19th to view the rupture site and to evaluate what needs to be done from a national perspective. We have 187,000 miles of pipeline nationally that have not been tested. So he is very anxious to come out and view it firsthand. I think that's a great indication of the fact that this just didn't happen to the community of San Bruno. It happened to this nation, and we need to take steps to make sure it doesn't happen again. Deborah Hersman, who is the chair of the National Transportation Safety Board, will be out here on June 8th to view the site as well, and she has committed that the report by the NTSB will be completed by August 30th. So we should have their conclusions and certainly their recommendations as well by that time. And we will look forward to both those visits and be, I think, very grateful for any insights they provide us. I'd like to also point out to PG&E's credit, You may recall that I introduced a bill last year on the heels of the explosion that was a national pipeline safety bill that had three major components. One was a notice to all residents within 2,000 feet of a transmission line that they be noticed by the local utility, that automatic and remote shutoff valves be placed in high consequence areas along transmission lines, and third, that there be a provision whereby various utilities across the country would provide for first responder training and information. To PG&E's credit, they have agreed to do every element of that bill with it not yet becoming law. So I really appreciate that and want to thank them for their recognition of the importance of doing that.
Read the questions from here on out. Okay, we're going to start with some questions here, and the first few are for Kirk, if you want to step to the podium. The first one is the maps showing the pipeline in our neighborhood are not consistent. One of PG&E's maps showed an active line on Sneath Lane, and the one on PG&E's website does not show a gas line there. Any idea?
Well, if I may, first off, there are gas transmission and gas distribution lines in the service in and around San Bruno, and what we've been talking about is specifically gas transmission lines. There is actually a map over there at the side that gives you a little bit more information on what is actually in and around the area, what's actually been abandoned in the area, which is that segment of pipe that ruptured last year and is now out of service, and all the gas transmission lines that are in the service area. In terms of distribution lines, there are gas distribution lines throughout all the roads, and there is a gas service line to every one of your homes. That's how we deliver gas into your home. So I don't think that you'll find the maps online to be necessarily incorrect. You may just simply be looking at one map that has a distribution line on it, and the other map has transmission lines on it. But that one up there is accurate and correct.
Thank you. This is from Mr. Sorensen. What does make you whole mean?
I am the Vice President of Gas Engineering and Operations, and I'm not sure what make you whole is intended for.
Probably for some other entities with PG&E, I would imagine.
Probably, yes, but if you have other questions or concerns, you can see us afterwards, and if there's a specific incident you're concerned with, you can certainly let us know, and we'll get you to the appropriate person.
Yeah, I believe that's what the president of PG&E, Chris Johns, those were his words, so
Okay.
we can always get him on the phone. For Mr. Reekle, we received a letter about 2 months ago about 2 to 5 a.m. surveying line 101, and my questions have not yet been answered. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know what specific letter you're talking about. There have been many letters go out to the citizens and the residents of San Bruno. We send out letters anytime we're doing any survey work, any integrity management work. You're sending out letters, as Congresswoman Spears pointed out, to all the residents within 2,000 feet of a pipeline. All the residents of San Bruno should be receiving a letter around gas safety, and it came with a little brochure. In case you lost it, there's more back there. But anytime we are doing work, including the pressure testing we're going to be talking about, including inspections, including integrity management, including digging up the pipeline to verify its condition, you will receive a letter on, and it should, in that letter, have a communications point of what to do in case you have any questions about what specifically is happening. And I will follow up and see what letters have been sent out most recently.
All right, and you probably answered most of this, but this is from Terry Nagel. How will you assure residents of all cities with gas pipelines have been adequately tested? And I know, before you answer that you have some prepared statements, so we'll take those right after this question.
Okay, great. In essence, what we're doing for the entire service territory is we have gone through the effort of looking for all of our what we call pressure test records, and Congresswoman Spears talked about hydro testing. That's one way to pressure test. Pressure testing is, hydro testing is the use of water versus some other medium. But we are in the process of pressure testing many pipelines throughout the service territory that have not been previously pressure tested. And I can cut it from my prepared remarks because we'll go to there next. But we are also preparing a filing that will go to the California Public Utilities Commission in the next 6 weeks to 8 weeks to talk about what we're going to do for every foot in every segment of our gas transmission pipeline throughout the entire service territory, and that'll include options such as replacing pipelines and pressure testing pipelines. Can I do my opening now?
please.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. Again, my name is Kirk Johnson. I'm the Vice President of Gas Engineering and Operations for Pacific Gas and Electric. And Mayor Wan and Congresswoman Spears, thank you again for the opportunity to speak to this group. I did want to cover very quickly 3 points. Some of them have already been hit on, so I'll go through them relatively quickly. The first was our effort to educate our customers in terms of gas safety. The second is, what are we doing for the system in the year 2011? What exactly are we doing, and what does that look like? And then a little more specifically, what will you see in and around the city of San Bruno specific to the activity tied to 2011? In terms of our education of our customers, as Congresswoman Spears pointed out, we are sending a letter out to everybody in the service territory. About 2.5 million customers will receive a letter from PG&E if they are within 2,000 miles of a gas transmission, or 2,000 feet, excuse me, 2,000 feet, clarify that. That would go far and beyond the safety activity that she requested. 2,000 feet of gas transmission pipeline. In that letter will be a brochure around safety tips for gas transmission lines, gas lines in general, talking about please call before you dig, if you smell gas, what to do, and how to gain additional information on the gas transmission system if you're interested. And again, it's a little blue brochure. Many of you have probably already received it in this room. If you're like myself and you've misplaced it, there are additional copies for you in the back. And please share the information with the folks you are living with your family, and with your friends. In terms of what PG&E is doing this year, in terms of checking the integrity of our lines over and above everything else that has previously happened, and it's already been pointed out, we've already committed to pressure testing or hydro testing 152 miles of pipeline and or replacing that pipeline throughout our entire service territory. In order to accomplish that, because when you pressure test a pipe, you can't just simply pressure test the segment that hasn't previously been pressure tested. You need to be in an area where you have lots of room and you're able to do construction work. We actually will be pressure testing about 250 miles of pipe, but about 100 of that has already been previously pressure tested. That work will be going on throughout the service territory. This is a major undertaking for PG&E. This is about 91 separate pressure tests, and we conducted historically about 3 to 4 a year. So it's a huge, huge change for us in terms of the amount of work we're going to be doing. And it's a big change because we have to take the pipes out of service in order to do that, and the majority of the work is the engineering and the construction work necessary to make sure we can continue to feed customers and serve customers while that segment of line is out of service. Specific to San Bruno, there are 2 areas that you're going to see activity in and around this area. The first area is right off Crestwood at a facility, a PG&E facility called Healy Station. This is a location we did a lot of work last year, and so a lot of the residents in that area have seen PG&E out there quite a bit. And I know many folks in this room have probably visited that location. We are scheduled to pressure test a 3-mile segment of line starting at Healy Station and moving into South San Francisco. So there will be a great deal of work in and around that area in terms of construction crews looking around and doing the engineering to make sure we can feed customers appropriately during this time period, and that sort of activity. You will also see, if you venture up into that area, a great deal of work in South San Francisco at the midpoint of that line and also at the end of the line. The other location that you'll see a great deal of activity is what we call the San Andreas Station. That is a location about half a mile south of San Bruno Avenue. It's on the watershed side of Skyline Boulevard. And again, we will be pressure testing about a 4-mile segment of line that operates south of San Andreas Station. And again, the same type of activity will be taking place in that area. To give you just a feel for what pressure testing is or hydro testing is, in essence what we do is the engineering and the construction necessary to make sure we can still feed customers after the pipe is taken out of service. Once that work is completed, we will then valve the section of line off. We will blow the gas down and evacuate the gas from the pipeline. We will then cut the pipeline free from its connection points. We will run a pig, what's known as a cleaning pig, through the pipeline to evacuate any debris or liquids in the pipe. And then we will start the construction process of putting on what we call test heads. These are big pieces of specialized equipment that we use for pressure testing. They are about anywhere from 12 to 15 feet long, and they'll be 30 to 36 inches in diameter for the pipelines that we're talking about here in the San Bruno area. There's also a lot of other activity and pressure equipment that gets hooked up. The pipe is simply filled up with water, and then it is pressurized to a point in excess of its maximum allowable operating pressure as it would currently or normally operate. In general, the pressure that we test to is about 1.5 times the maximum allowable operating pressure. So if a pipeline normally has a maximum allowable operating pressure of 400 pounds, we're going to pressure test to at least 600 pounds. And normally those tests take about 8 hours to conduct. That is a normal, standard hydrostatic test. And as Congresswoman Spears pointed out, this is one of the many standards available to ensure the integrity of the pipeline. It's something used throughout the gas pipeline business, the oil pipeline business. It's used on propane tanks that you use in your barbecue, and folks who work off of propane. Very, very common test procedure, and that is what PG&E will undertake going forward. In terms of what you will see in your neighborhoods is when the gas is blown down, you may smell gas. You will be notified of that. We will be sending out letters to first responders, to cities, counties, everybody in the area. There will be door hangers. But the reality of is in day-to-day life, we forget about these activities, and when it happens, it comes back to light, but you will smell a little bit of gas on the day it is blown down. In concluding my remarks, I would just simply like to say, again, thank you for coming tonight, and I thank you for your patience in advance of all the activity that's going to go on that PG&E will likely put you through. Construction can be noisy. It can cause issues in the streets in terms of migrating through the streets, and it can cause other traffic issues, and those will all occur during this construction activity. But it is critical that we do this. It's critical that we get started with the pressure testing of our pipelines, and it is one step we can make going forward to ensure the integrity of the pipeline system is as good as it can possibly be. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Kurt, 2 questions to start us off. One, when in your opening remarks, you talked about pressure testing and suggested that hydro testing is one of the types of pressure testing. Are you considering doing some other kind of pressure testing other than hydro testing?
Well, the issue that stands is pressure testing as defined for the pipe, and the pipe doesn't care what's in it to be tested. It doesn't care if it sees water, natural gas, air, Kool-Aid, or anything else you want to put in it. You pressurize that up, and you're testing the integrity of the pipeline. Water testing or hydro testing is without a doubt the most common type of testing. It is used probably 90 to 95% of the time. It's the easiest to work with, generally speaking, and it's the preferred method we all have for pressure testing, if indeed it can be done that way. There are scenarios, and they are relatively limited, but there are scenarios where you can't hydro test or water test. And those scenarios, generally speaking, are in and around waterways, where if a release of water was to occur, it could cause a problem for the environment, and over some of the older bridges in the state of California and other states, where if you were to fill up a large diameter pipeline full of water, the weight of that water in itself would cause a problem for the bridge. So in general, hydro testing and pressure testing are used synonymous. They go back and forth. Hydro testing is the most common technique. It is a technique we will use if at all available. But there may be times where if you're going over a bridge, you have to simply do a pressure test.
And then I don't know if this has been clarified by the CPUC, and maybe Mr. Clannon should respond to this, or maybe you have subsequently decided to. The 500 miles of pipeline that you do not have documentation for, have you committed to hydro testing that part of your system?
In terms of the mileage, and just for clarification, I think you're all well aware that we were ordered and recommended by the NTSB and ordered by the CPUC to review our records and report out, and that occurred on March 15th earlier this year. And there are pipelines that do not have pressure test records. Those pipelines, pressure test records, pressure testing was required, started in 1961 in the state of California. So any pipeline built prior to that would not necessarily have a pressure test record. It wasn't done. So for that segment of pipes, and whether it ends up being 400 miles or 500 miles or how it's previously reported in some of the papers is larger than that, What we'll be filing with the commission in 2 months is just what to do with every one of those segments of pipe. Pressure testing is certainly an option. Replacing is another very viable option in many cases, or there may be other circumstances we want to look at, such as reducing the pressure to the point where it is no longer operating as a gas transmission line. But we will be filing that in 6 weeks, and as part of a ongoing hearing that the CPUC has on rulemaking.
Kirk, regarding the pressure testing, the question came up, with this hydro testing, how do you determine if the pipe is safe? Does it blow? Does it, in other words, what indication does it give you that in fact the pipe is safe? And of course, how do you measure and what happens if the pipe is not safe?
Okay. The pressure test, as I mentioned, is we will fill, in this particular case, we're talking about hydro tests, so I'll stay focused on that. We will evacuate the gas, and we will fill that pipeline up with water, and we will pump that water up to a pressure well in excess of any pressure we'll see during normal operations. There's really two purposes to what is typically is called a pressure test. One is to ensure the integrity of the pipeline, to ensure the seams in that pipe and the steel of that pipe can withstand the pressure. Excuse me. That's the first issue you're looking for. And the second issue you're looking for is there a leak in the pipeline itself. The way the pipeline test works is you bring out certified, you bring out folks who do this for a living, and that's what PG&E will do. We'll be hiring folks to do hydrostatic testing. You hook up equipment to that, and you monitor the temperature, the pressures up and down the pipeline at the low point, at the high point. And then you also have another third party that sits over the top and makes sure it gets done correctly, in addition to the CPUC, which will normally join us there, and making sure this all goes correctly. And you will monitor the pressure in that pipeline for a minimum of 8 hours to make sure nothing happens. What can happen, or what people talk about, what if something doesn't work right, which I think was a part of the question. There are two things that can happen during a hydro test that aren't necessarily what we want to see. The first is that we have a leak in the pipe itself. This can happen either on a fitting or on another piece that doesn't normally see that kind of pressure and leaks, and or it can happen on the pipeline itself if there's active corrosion or something else where the pipeline actually leaks. Those are pretty easy to find with water. The area gets wet, and you can also sense that water movement with some instrumentation that is available to us. So if that case occurs, and that's probably the most likely case if a pressure test doesn't work the first time, we will dig up that pipeline and we will repair the leak, either putting on a sleeve, which is a big metal band that goes around the entire pipeline, or if necessary, we'll replace a section of the pipeline and then we'll start all over again. And you have to continue to do this until you pass the actual test itself. The second issue is a pipeline seam, and that is when pipes are made, they are made out of steel and they are rolled together and then welded at the top of the manufacturer's facility. That pipeline seam potentially could fail. The pipeline seams are at the top of the pipes when they're constructed, and so there would be a significant amount of water in that area, and you would see a small burst of energy when it first released its water, but it's a non-compressible fluid, so what you get is it would look like maybe a water main that might break in the neighborhood, or it might look like somebody who's emptying their pool in your neighborhood where you just have a lot of water running down the road. And obviously, in that situation, we will dig up the pipe, we will replace that piece of pipe, and we will start the entire process over again. You have to stay within certain parameters at each elevation point, high point and low point, for an entire 8-hour period, or the pressure test does not pass and therefore has to be redone again.
Will you be reporting any leaks to the CPUC?
Yes, any leaks that occur on a pressure test are reported to the CPUC now. They will be reported in the future, and they're reported as part of the hydrostatic test process. And it is required that you mark down any activity that happened during that test, including leaks or seam failures, so there's a record of it.
And Mr. Clannon, will you make that public?
We will, and if I can just, we will, and if I can just add a little bit more to that. This whole testing process that Mr. Johnson's talking about has been worked out in conjunction with the PUC engineers, with the PUC staff, and we've written down the requirements of what PG&E is going to do, what their obligations are to us and to you, so that we can make sure that they do that.
And I would simply add that you will receive a letter that a hydro test is taking place in your neighborhood. You'll be invited to a town hall, or excuse me, not a town hall, a walk-in where you can learn more about hydro testing than you probably ever cared to know, but we can answer all your questions. And then after the pressure test is done, you'll receive a letter from us on the results also.
And while you're still there, I know you need a breather, but
That's okay.
What will happen to the lots or the houses sold to or through PG&E?
That I honestly can't answer. Would have to take that one off and talk to the folks who are actually working with the real estate section. I can't speak to that.
Okay? Yeah,
We'll-
you'll get an answer back to us.
We'll get an answer back to you.
We'll get it on the
question and
website.
we'll get the answer back to you.
Yeah, all of these questions will be turned over to staff, and we'll make sure all the answers are in fact on the website. So, Mr. Goff sent for a map from PG&E, said no pipeline within 2 miles. Then I get a letter saying there is one within 2,000 feet.
Well, I can't speak to that. If you are within 2,000 feet, you probably got a letter from us. If you're in the city of San Bruno, everybody in the city of San Bruno got a letter. So we simply look at it, and we can look at the map over there and determine what your address is and see if in reality exactly what you're up against. But if you received a letter from us that you're within 2,000 feet, then you should be within 2,000 feet of a gas transmission pipeline. Previous letters that went out that actually spoke of being within 500 feet of a gas transmission pipeline. So there may be some discrepancy there also.
All right, that's all I have right now. Jackie, did you have a couple addressed to you?
This is from Thomas Miller, and he asks, has PG&E helped the residents any further? Is that?
They're gonna be able to, have a few more extra bucks. I mean, they need to be mailed whole as much as you possibly can. And the way I believe is, some of the PG hierarchy need to really be held accountable, and I do mean accountable. And I have my more or less jail time, the way I look at it. That's my opinion. Thank you much, Ms. Congressman.
All right. There is a trust fund that has been created, has there not? Is that outside your purview in
That's
gas?
outside gas engineering and operations, yeah.
I think that for those of you who've received actual payments from PG&E, those were initial payments. Some of you have negotiated with PG&E final settlements. Some of you have sought legal advice. I'm presuming that that process is ongoing and that PG&E has been responsive to you. If that's not the case, you should certainly let the city fathers and mothers know, or let my office know.
Okay, then I have a few questions for, I'm sorry, Jackie, go ahead.
This is from Larry Greenberg. My homeowner's insurance increased by $200 this year. Was it approved by the Department of Insurance before September 9th? Having some experience with the insurance department in California over a number of years, what I'd like to do, Larry, is have my office research this specifically. No one should necessarily have received an increase because of the explosion, and we need to make sure that that is not the case. But we will look into it and get right back to you. Make sure we have your actual address on Fleetwood so we can communicate with you.
Wait, we're gonna get a microphone.
Whatever, the insurance is going to add points. Whatever the insurance company is, they are going to put points. It's just like automobile insurance, and your insurance will increase. Now, I haven't pursued it since then. This was about October or November, but they said that it would be increased because of this, because of the claims.
Well, as you remember, the insurance commissioner, I think, actually came here and held a hearing. I will, pursue it, because I do think that there could be an effort by some insurers to take advantage of the circumstances when, in fact, there really should be no points added. I believe that once everything is said and done, San Bruno is going to be the safest place to live near a natural gas transmission line, and so certainly having points associated with your insurance should not be indicated. I had one last question. When is the reassessment being done? This is from Mr. Sorensen on Earl. This is a county issue. I don't know if Mr. Wagstaff can respond to that question. You know, reassessments are done on a regular basis every year. If you want to appeal the assessment on your property, there is a process and a form to fill out to do that. They are automatically reassessed downward in circumstances where the actual property assessment value has been reduced, and they can also be reduced by virtue of the appeals process. And if Mr. Sorensen on Earl will speak to Brian Perkins on my staff, we'll follow through and get you a more elaborate answer.
All right, this goes to both Kirk and Paul, and you can just sit there because you probably want to sit there for this one anyway. How can consumers be assured that all testing results will be credible and forthcoming, since accountability of both agencies has been less than acceptable from a customer's standpoint? What agency will monitor CPUC to ensure credibility?
Well, let me start on that. So I'm Paul Clandon again. I'm the executive director at the Public Utilities Commission. I'm a 26-year veteran of the PUC. I've worked in energy issues my whole career. I've been the executive director now for about 4 years. Who oversees the PUC? You do. And everything that we do happens in public. We'll be making public, actually, if you go to the PUC website now, you'll see the letters that go back and forth between Congresswoman Spear and the Public Utilities Commission, between PG&E and the Public Utilities Commission. We've thrown open the doors. We are as transparent as we can possibly be. We understand that our credibility is at stake here, not just in what happened on September 9th, but what happens every day post-September 9th from today and today on forward. So the doors are open, and we are as transparent as you can possibly be. I am overseen by 5 commissioners. They're appointed by the governor. I'm overseen by the California State Legislature. Some days it seems to me that I'm overseen by just about everybody in the state. I agree with Congresswoman Spear that San Bruno, and not just San Bruno, but Northern California, and not just Northern California, is going to be the safest place to live near a natural gas pipeline when this is done. What happened here in this town, what happened just a mile or so from here, is a game changer. It's a game changer at the Public Utilities Commission. It's a game changer at PG&E. It's a game changer much more broadly than that. And when I get a chance to do a few remarks, I'll talk about that a little bit. We understand at the Public Utilities Commission who we work for, and we understand who we're accountable to, and you're right here in this room.
Thank you. To Kirk, how often do you pressure test the pipelines?
Pipelines are pressure tested anytime when they're constructed brand new. Anything since 1961 is pressure tested when it's first built at the mill, and then it is put on what we're calling now a pressure test is actually done on site right after construction. And then they can be pressure tested again if they need to be pressure tested to validate their MAOP. Normally, other integrity management tools are used over and above pressure testing after a new pipeline is put into place.
But isn't it important to point out that line 132 had never been pressure tested?
The segment that failed in line 132 had never been pressure tested. That's correct. It was built in 1956, prior to pressure testing.
Can I expand on that a bit? Because I think that's really maybe the critical issue, both for your legislation and also for the Public Utilities Commission. Some of these pipelines were grandfathered in 1970 that had never been pressure tested. That grandfathering was perfectly legal. It's the way things were done in 1970. In addition to other things, what happened on September 9th changes that. That's not going to last in California. It may well not last nationally. Probably the single most important thing that the PUC is doing in California right now, in addition to taking immediate daily steps to make sure by pressure reductions and the hydro testing that Mr. Johnson's talked about, that system is as safe as it can be, is to turn the page on that grandfathering and replace it with things that have been tested or pipes that have been replaced and tested. The Public Utilities Commission is looking hard at that right now. I'll say a word about how we do that and how you can participate. But when you peel it all back, what needs to happen as a result of what we learned from what happened here is that grandfathering has to go away, and there have to be no assumptions and there have to be no guesses about the natural gas pipeline network. It's got to be tested, or it's got to be replaced and tested.
Let me just add to that. In conversations with the chairwoman of the NTSB, she has made it very clear that the congressional process by which the pipeline safety law was passed and signed had a rationale that suggested that if these pipes have been operational for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they therefore must be safe. And with that kind of rationale, the grandfathering was created. The irony, of course, is that the older the pipe, the more likely that it's going to be subject to corrosion and many other problems and fatigue. So the grandfathering rationale never should have been embraced by Congress. And I think moving forward, both when Secretary Ray LaHood comes to visit and when the chairwoman comes to visit, I think we will be hearing a greater movement to getting rid of grandfathering generally.
And we have the ability to move even faster in California. We have the ability to go further than the federal laws, and that's what we're moving as quickly as possible to do right now.
I have a few questions for the city of San Bruno. Connie Jackson, if you could come up here and then call the people that the questions pertain to as far as staff. Connie here, there she is. The first one is topographic survey cost is being carried by the city. Can the city or PG&E carry the cost of soil analysis that is needed for construction?
Right. Thank you. The survey work that's being done, and I believe that, as Mr. Acton indicated, that continues to be in process. We hope to be able to complete that fairly soon. It was something that we, in conjunction with some of the early homeowners rebuilding, determined would be of area-wide benefit, that a survey could be done efficiently and could be done in a manner that would benefit numbers of property owners, again, in an efficient and we hoped cost-effective manner. Soil analysis is a little bit of a different type of activity in that it really needs to be done given the unique characteristics of each lot, and there may be many similarities, but it's a more precise lot-by-lot type of activity. That said, if there are property owners who are interested in working together with the city, we would certainly be interested in hearing from you and assessing the need and the interest within the neighborhood to see whether that would be an efficient and effective way to get that work done. So again, Mr. Acton, or in Mr. Acton's temporary absence, Mark, if you could raise your hand, please. Mr. Mark Sullivan in the Planning Department. Either one of them are available if you would like to connect with them directly tonight, and otherwise via a telephone call to the Planning Department.
This is probably a joint question for PG&E and the city. Has anyone thought of providing alternative forms of power for the new homes, wind or solar?
I'd like to give a quick answer to that. This is something that we have actually not yet had detailed discussions with PG&E about, but it's something that, again, the city of San Bruno would be very interested in understanding and assessing the interest within the community and within the neighborhood. We have been approached by an organization whose business it is to assist in facilitating design and development of energy efficient homes. This group has a business specialty of assisting in the design of buildings that then can meet LEED standards. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that program for energy efficiency. There's a cost associated with that, and there generally is a cost a little bit more. It costs a little bit more to build a LEED certified home, and so this group has also been active in trying to locate funding sources both for their services as well as potentially to assist homeowners in working towards those objectives in the building of their own homes. So that's something that, again, the city is very interested. We've had some initial conversations with the group. It's called Global Green, and we're very interested in understanding from the community if that's something that at least a few of you are interested in. Then we would like to coordinate with you and PG&E and anybody else to see if we might be able to make that happen.
And I would simply say PG&E supports many of the alternative energy sources, including solar, which is very common in the San Francisco Bay Area, and there's a lot of tools available both for retrofitting of homes today and the building of new homes, and we'd be happy to work with the city on that.
From Sorensen, when are utilities going back in? I'm 3 houses from Glenview.
So I think what I'll just do is supplement what Mr. Acton said earlier. The planning, the initial planning for what is a very complicated design effort is beginning, and that's going to need to be done very closely in conjunction with the property owners that are rebuilding their properties in the neighborhood. So we are in the process of putting together plans to develop the initial alternatives analysis, moving then to the design of the actual infrastructure and utilities, and coordinating with the property owners who are most immediately affected and who need those services. As Mr. Acton indicated also earlier, water and sewer services are available. We've made a permanent repair to the sewer system. We did that almost immediately after the incident in the first period of time after September 9th. And we have made temporary repairs to the water system. So your utilities are generally in place, but there's a complexity associated with the permanent repairs and the additional infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, et cetera, even the PG&E gas and electric facilities. So that process is moving forward, and we expect to be able to coordinate with those of you who are rebuilding your homes and want to get into your finished homes whenever, as soon as that is possible.
When is the grass going to be cut? The city planted the grass seed, so should be able to cut it. It will be a fire hazard when it dries.
Okay, so we all should have been able to anticipate that putting the grass seed on the vacant lots was not only necessary to prevent the erosion threat, but that eventually it would grow into weeds, and that those weeds would then dry out. So unfortunately, this is an issue that I just heard about today, that's already beginning to happen. So I'll be working with the staff over the next couple of days in order to see if again, we might be able to coordinate in some manner with the property owners whose properties we're talking about, where that erosion control was put down, and see if we can't develop some means of getting that done on a regular basis. And again, I think that's something that perhaps we could develop a program whereby the city coordinates that, because all of you trying to take care of that individually is probably more of a headache than is really necessary. So again, we'll be working on that quickly and reaching back out to the property owners that are affected.
All right, thank you. And Paul, did you have some prepared statements that you wanted to?
Yeah,
delivered?
I don't want to drone on with a big speech, but if I could just come to the podium and just say 2 or 3 things.
Please.
It's good to get a look at who's talking with you, at least for a minute. Paul Clannon, I'm the Executive Director at the Public Utilities Commission. We're headquartered up in San Francisco. There are some PUC employees here in the room. They're not plants, they're people who live nearby here, and they're concerned about San Bruno, and they're your neighbors. We lost one of our own in the explosion and fire, along with her daughter. It's something that we feel, what happened in San Bruno is not business as usual for us. And the work that we're doing to follow up and to ensure gas pipeline safety is not business as usual in any way. I've said that here in this room a couple of times before, and I'll say it here again. It's a game changer what happened here in this community for the Public Utilities Commission, for PG&E on a much broader stage. So we're looking at 3 things. Making sure that PG&E, and not just PG&E, but also the gas pipeline systems in Southern California are safe. We are doing that by ordering and encouraging and working with the utilities to do these record searches to make sure that they know what they've got underground. You can't operate a system safely if you don't know what you've got underground. Once you do know what you have underground, that leads you into decisions about the kinds of tests that you should be doing, about the kinds of replacement you should be considering, and alternatives like that. We're doing that all up and down the state. There are a number of pipelines throughout Northern California, including all the ones here on the peninsula, that we've ordered pressure reductions on, or the pressure reductions have followed PUC orders. That's to make sure, until we know what caused the explosion in detail, and I'll talk about that in a sec, that's to ensure that we know that those pipelines are being operated safely right now. They're still out there. We're all still gas customers. There's still gas flowing through those pipelines. To make sure that they're safe until we take further steps, we've had PG&E lower the pressure, and we're considering doing that in Southern California as well. So thing number one is making sure that the gas pipeline network that's out there right now is safe. Thing number two is, what about the future? We've talked about this grandfathering. That's over, and we're working on what replaces it. Congresswoman Spear is a leader in that. So are we here in California. We have the ability to adopt rules that go further than the federal rules. We'll be exercising that ability. We're already pretty far down the road of a formal public rulemaking process to do that. That's what I know I'm going to use the buzzword, so I'll just say it. That's the rulemaking that the PUC is engaged in. If you go to our website, if you click the San Bruno button, you can participate in that rulemaking. You can see all the documents, and you yourself can put your ideas in there, and you can watch us as we make that decision this year. It's not going to take a long time. We've set the goal of making those decisions this year. It's a public process that's actually kind of lightning fast to make decisions like that. A lot of you in this room tonight were here for the public participation hearing that we held here a few weeks ago. That was in that rulemaking. So the statements that you made, the statements that your neighbors made, those ideas are now in our rulemaking and they're getting considered. So we've talked about the grandfathering, just a few concepts that are also several of these in Congresswoman Spear's proposed legislation. What about first responders and emergency response? There were some real problems with that here in San Bruno. We'll be having a public process inviting the first responders to come to us to tell us what rules we should be setting for how much information do the utilities, the pipeline operators, need to give first responders in advance, long before anything, God forbid, happens. And in the event of a crisis, in the event of emergency, how do they work together? Remote control valves and automatic valves. Took 90 minutes to get the gas to stop flowing here in San Bruno. That needs never to happen again. It's not a cheap thing to do to install automatic valves or remote control valves. We need to be thoughtful about where we direct those things to be installed, but they very clearly need to be part of the pipeline network. There's a lot of issues in that rulemaking, and I don't want to just drone on talking about all of them. You may have questions that elicit some more of those, but you should know that the game changer that was the explosion here in San Bruno is going to result in a safer pipeline network in California, and we think throughout the whole country over the next weeks, months, and years. And nobody is sitting on their hands waiting for that to happen. So number one, making sure it's safe now. Number two, making sure it's safer in the future. Number three is investigating the cause of that accident. Now, the PUC staff was here in San Bruno the night of the explosion. We've been investigating it since then. We're part of the National Transportation Safety Board investigation. That will be concluded, we understand, in August. So we'll know from the NTSB, the recognized experts, along with PUC staff and others, exactly what happened so that we can use that information to see whether PG&E needs to be penalized, and if so, how and how much, and also to make sure that we take that information into this going forward safety. What about the Public Utilities Commission? We very early on understood that this broke, right? People died as a result of a failure in a system that we were an integral part of. So in October, right after the explosion, we announced the formation of an independent review panel. We appointed that panel in November. They're finishing up their investigation now. They're going to make their recommendations public next month in May. It's going to happen even before the NTSB, telling us how the PUC should change and how PG&E should change. Those aren't PUC employees. They don't work for me. They're not answerable to the PUC commissioners. They're independent experts. They're independent people who are going to speak their mind in a public way. And that will be entirely public when they make their recommendations, and you'll have a chance to weigh in. The Congresswoman asked a couple of questions, and I want to make sure I answer them. Who's paying for this testing? PG&E is paying for it. So the work that's going on now, the work that Kirk talked about, the 150 miles of hydro testing and potential replacement that PG&E is undertaking this year, shareholders are paying for that. There's no request by PG&E that ratepayers pay for it. PG&E has every right someday to come in and say, from now on, we want ratepayers to help out with the paying for that. If they ask, then the PUC will have a very public process. I invite you to imagine the kinds of arguments that the PUC commissioners would have to hear in order for them to make that decision. Right? That's going to be a high burden to meet. PG&E has every right to try to meet that burden and every legal right, and I fully expect them to try to do that. That will be a forward-looking decision. So this money that's being spent now, this testing that's being done now, you will not pay for that. PG&E shareholders will pay for it. And I can talk in more detail about that as we get to it. And finally, just the last thing. So the pipeline replacement program, what happened to that money? Why did the pipeline replacement program slow down? And you know, what happened to that money? The reason that it's taking us so long to answer the Congresswoman's good question is that we're essentially conducting an audit of that money, going back to the 80s. We're having to pull records out of PG&E archives and so on. We're being deliberate about it because we need to get this answer right. When we get the answer, and I've been told by my staff, Congresswoman, that I'm able to promise it to you within the next 2 weeks, and you just heard me do that, we'll make that public. And whatever direction that information takes us in, that's the direction we'll go. So I'm here for your questions, and I thank you very much for being here. And I really just say that my heart goes out to this community. And when I drive here from the PUC to come to events here, I am fully aware that I'm driving the route that Jackie drove the night of the explosion, just a few minutes before the explosion. I saw her in the PUC the day before, and we said hello in the elevator. And I have to tell you, I never come here without thinking about that. Thank you.
Paul was talking about Jackie Green.
About Jackie Gregg, the PUC employee who was a victim.
Paul, one other question. What agency will oversee CPUC to ensure that testing and deficiency issues will be forthcoming and credible? Consumers do not oversee the CPUC. If we did, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight. I think the answer to that question, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Administration on a federal level oversees the CPUC. In fact, there is about $3 million a year that the taxpayer funds on a federal level that are conveyed to the CPUC to actually take on the responsibilities of auditing the various utilities as it relates to safety.
No, that's right, and that's an important addition to the ones that I mentioned earlier. We're overseen by the state legislature, by the 5 PUC commissioners themselves, and also by the federal agency.
If Steve Wagstaff is still here, I'd like to have him come forward and at least address the question that's been on many people's minds today as a result of the publication by the U.S. Attorney that they are in the process of investigation. Do you want to come up to the microphone?
Thank you, and good evening. I'm Steve Wagstaff. I'm the district attorney. The United States Attorney's Office in San Francisco, which covers our area, certainly all of Northern California, put out an announcement this morning that they are conducting an investigation into this matter. That's all they're going to say. They won't say anything further. That announcement by itself was a very unusual thing for a United States Attorney's Office to do. Normally, they neither confirm nor deny whether any investigation is going on. It's the significance of how they're approaching this matter. But again, we will not hear anything else from the United States Attorney about this until they've completed their investigation. Secondly, the District Attorney's Office, my office, has been involved in looking at this entire matter since September of last year. And again, without going into detail, because anytime there's an ongoing review, investigation into a matter, we don't go into details, we don't describe what we're doing, other than to tell you that I have been in contact with the United States Attorney's Office, with the California Attorney General's Office throughout these proceedings. And myself, your police chief, Chief Telford, we are all working together hand in glove. We are not repeating actions. We're not covering the same ground. We are not a variety of different agencies falling over ourselves inefficiently. It's not being done that way. It's a very cohesive look at what's going on. And beyond that, there's not a whole bunch to say. When we're doing these type of investigations, we do not make announcements. The only thing I can tell you is what you've been listening to with the Congresswoman and others tonight in San Bruno is going forward. What's being done going forward? What are we going to do to ensure that something like this doesn't occur again. Both PG&E, CPUC have said that. That's not what we do. That's not where our focus is. Our focus is on what occurred back in September and the events on that day and what led up to it on that day. That's what our review investigation is looking at. We certainly have it, you have it in very good hands who is going to be dealing going forward. That's not where we're looking. We're looking to see whether there has been any violation of California's criminal laws, any of their civil enforcement laws, to determine whether any action is warranted by our office. So that's sort of where we're at, what we're doing. And again, as with the U.S. Attorney, there won't be anything coming. There won't be from us until we've completed. One thing that's the linchpin that was mentioned is the NTSB report. That's crucial for us too. It's no different than if we were dealing on a far more minor thing, but assume that there was a car collision in which somebody was killed. Cases we deal with regularly. We don't just go in and form an opinion about whether there was a crime or not. We wait until the accident reconstruction is done and tells us what happened. This far more significant issue is the same thing. We're going to wait till the NTSB tells us what happened. So when that report comes out in August or September, we will be as avidly looking at it as all the other people who've mentioned that's importance. And so unless there's some other questions, that's what's going on from the point of view of the District Attorney's Office. That's what was going on with that announcement from the U.S. Attorney's Office today and the California Attorney General's Office. Again, it is, all of us are looking at it from a different perspective than what you heard for the first hour and 20 minutes tonight. Thank you, and again, I've been to several of these town meetings, and as was noted earlier, every time I hear what you're wrestling with, my heart goes out to you, and all I can do is assure you that your District Attorney's Office will do what's right based on whatever information we receive. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. We have time for just a few more questions. One is a repeat, but I think it's worth repeating. I'll ask Connie Jackson to address it. What will happen to lots or houses sold to or through PG&E?
So, as you know, I'm the city manager for your city. I don't represent PG&E. It is, however, I do have some information, and I thought I would be able to share it from my perspective, since Mr. Johnson is not associated with the real estate division in PG&E. I can tell you what we've been told and how we've been coordinating with PG&E about the lots that may come into PG&E's ownership. First of all, PG&E is committed, and they have followed through on the commitment to keep the city of San Bruno informed at the point where they can publicly speak about any real estate transactions that they are undertaking with members of your neighborhood. As of today, or as of now, I am understanding that there are 3 lots that are in escrow, that are actively in the process of being purchased by PG&E under their it's not the value assurance program, the repurchase program that PG&E has offered to residents of the Glenview neighborhood. At this point, I don't think it's known to them, certainly not known to me, how many lots might eventually be purchased through this program. That's really up to the property owners, you folks yourselves, and your negotiations with PG&E. What will happen to those lots is going to be they will be owned by PG&E. However, the other commitment that's been made by PG&E, and which is actively being followed through on, is that discussions and decisions about the disposition of those lots will be made collaboratively with the city of San Bruno. At this point, it's my understanding and my strong belief that PG&E has not made a decision. Certainly, the city of San Bruno has not provided definitive instruction or opinions about that. We're in a fairly early stage of the repurchase program. I believe that the sort of general interest would be to seek some way of assuring that those lots do not remain vacant, but that they are in some manner contributing to development of a once again vital, friendly, and stable, secure neighborhood. So that's what I know at this time, and again, we're interested in the community's position and perspective about how the neighborhood is rebuilt, what it looks like, how it operates, and those lots that PG&E might ultimately acquire are critical, in my opinion, to how your neighborhood is eventually rebuilt. So we will be very interested to hear from you as well as that process moves forward. Sure.
The-
Get up every day when I raise those blinds. There are 3 homes that are being neglected. The lawns are overgrown. The garbage cans are sitting outside. You know, I've been in this neighborhood for 45 years. I'd like to see the neighborhood kept up. And I don't know whose responsibility that is right now. If they're in a transition period, whether it's the homeowner's responsibility to take care of those homes still, or PG&E, or if the city's going to step in, but it's not a very pleasant sight to wake up to every day along with everything else. It's very
Sure.
disconcerting. And I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Sure, right.
Yeah.
The short answer is that it is the private property owner's responsibility to maintain their property in an acceptable manner, consistent with the community's standards. So not knowing exactly the precise situation you're talking about, I'm assuming that you might be talking about properties where residents have not returned for one reason or and they don't intend to. Okay. Okay. Right. Well, yeah, so I guess the thing I could say right now, and obviously this is an issue that we need to work on quickly, is that the normal process for dealing with property owners who don't maintain their properties in an acceptable manner is our code enforcement process, where we issue notices of violation and we seek enforcement. I don't think that's a path that the city is wanting to go down in this particular case, so obviously we have to come up with something different to contact and work with those property owners. That would not be PG&E's responsibility until and unless they are the property owner, and it's not, except from an enforcement perspective, it's not the city's initial responsibility, but certainly we have an interest, the neighborhood has an interest, and I think that we need to put something together that assures you're likely to spend a fair amount of time looking at vacant lots, which I think you have, we're going to have to accept, some, yeah, and so you've already got enough going on that maintenance of the properties should be the easy part, and so we'll see what we can do about that. Thank you.
Okay, our time's just about up. I would like to ask Congresswoman Spear to help us close out here. Jackie?
Thank you, Jim. Once again, this community has shown me how in one's grief and in one's act of rebuilding, you can conduct yourself in a very responsible and effective manner. So I thank you for showing restraint when you didn't want to, and for showing once again what a great community San Bruno is.
Thank you very much. And in closing, you heard tonight about the Recovery Center. Please make use of it, and we hope to see you all on May 22nd, where it'll be a nice sunny day and we'll have a little bite to eat and talk. So thank you very, very much again for attending.